Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. In today's video we're going to be exploring a very disturbing topic, audio recordings of people's final moments. So let's just jump into it. I've got 3 different cases to look at today. Number 1, the last voicemail of Joe Phillips. The High Tread International Tyre Recycling Plant spans 20 acres and it's located in Lockport near New York. By 2016 it was largely inoperative and abandoned. The place wasn't completely cleared out though. There were many objects that were just left behind when the plant closed. The facility had been securely locked up, but local teenagers soon discovered that they could access the office buildings by climbing the fire escape ladder onto the roof and then jumping inside. It's not surprising then that the abandoned High Tread tyre recycling plant quickly became a popular hangout spot for local youths. Late one afternoon, on Wednesday, August 10th, 2016, 14-year-old Joe Phillips and his 13-year-old friend, whose name has never been revealed to the public, were exploring the High Tread International office building. The boys captured their adventure on a mobile phone. After gaining entry into the office space via the roof, the footage reveals some charred stacks of paper, showcasing the boys' habit of setting fire to various items during their visits. Only small segments of the video is available online. They show one of the boys navigating dark rooms with a makeshift torch crafted from rolled office paper. The video then shows the boys igniting office papers and cardboard on the office floor. Although the footage is incomplete, it generally suggests that the boys had started multiple fires within the building, and it appears that this time they're trying to create a larger fire than in their previous explorations.
This is how you make like a real big fire.
You crush it?
Wait, no. See?
Oh, it's gonna spread out.
Oh, do the smoke.
Bro, that's so cool.
Unfortunately, one of the fires that they started eventually slipped out of control. When they realised the gravity of the situation, Joe's friend ran outside. Allegedly he was going to fetch some water. Meanwhile, Joe stayed behind and attempted to smother the flames, first by stamping on them and then by using his shirt. Tragically, this was the last time that Joe Phillips was seen alive. Unbeknownst to both boys, the office building that they were setting fires in was right next to a vast warehouse. This warehouse contained over £8 million of highly flammable, pulverised tyres. The fire that they'd started managed to spread to the warehouse. Once outside, Joe's friend saw the blaze spreading to the warehouse, and he quickly realised that no amount of water would help put out the fire. The blaze was spreading extremely rapidly and producing enormous amounts of thick black smoke. Allegedly at this point, he believed that Joe had already left the facility. Overwhelmed by panic, instead of calling 911, he ran back to another friend's house. He and his friends debated over whether to inform anyone about the situation. It was around this time that local residents began noticing a massive black plume of smoke rising from the recycling centre, and it was at this point that the first calls were made to the fire department. The fire became so massive and the smoke so toxic that over 200 families had to be evacuated from their homes. The blaze also inflicted substantial financial damage, soaring to over $13 million, and the intense heat generated by the inferno was powerful enough to melt plastic garden chairs in nearby backyards. Over 40 fire departments had to be mobilised to try and put down the fire, and it took them 3 days to finally get it under control. During this whole time, there was no sign of Joe. Initially, Joe's family held on to hope that he'd survived the fire and had gone into hiding, afraid of the consequences that he would face. Sadly, this wasn't the case, and his horribly burnt body was later found in the facility grounds. During the following court case, the majority of the blame for the fire was placed on Joe Phillips. The family of the other boy presented the videos that were recorded during the escapade, which showed that Joe had played a key role in setting the fires himself. One other disturbing piece of media was presented. A voicemail that Joe Phillips had sent to his friend shortly after his friend left the facility.
You're a fuck! I'm really fucked! You're a die! Baby! I love you, man. I don't have to die this way.
Now, it's a little bit unclear as to which point Joe's friend actually heard this recording. During the court case, he said that he was unaware of it until much later, but Joe's mother wasn't convinced. During an interview, she stated that her son's friend had ignored this last phone call. She said that he saw Joe in that burning building. He knew it was burning and he ran out. She said, "You can't tell me that you didn't get that phone call until later, that you didn't know. You did know, and you left him there." I think most of us have wondered at some point in our lifetime what we would do when faced with our own inevitable deaths. I find Joe Phillips's last words disturbing because he sounds so resigned to his fate. But here it is, Joe Phillips's final words.
You're a fuck! I'm really fucked! You're a die! Baby! I love you, man. I don't have to die this way.
Number 2. The Deborah Stevens 911 call. On August 24th, 2019, 47-year-old Deborah Stevens got up early. As had been her routine for the past 21 years, she set out in her grey SUV to deliver newspapers. That morning, the city of Fort Smith, USA, was experiencing exceptionally heavy rainfall, which led to flash flooding in parts of the city, and they had numerous road closures. Despite the warnings from authorities, the water levels rose so quickly that many drivers, including Deborah, were caught completely off guard. Around 4:30 a.m, whilst driving her usual route, Deborah failed to realise that the road that she was on was literally turning into a river. It's unclear whether she decided to just push through the water hoping to get across, or she simply realised far too late how serious the situation was. Nevertheless, the sheer volume of the water and the strong current swept her SUV off the road and into an unfamiliar neighbourhood where it became stuck at the end of a flooded parking lot. Surrounded by water on all sides and completely unsure what to do, Deborah initially called her mother-in-law, who was also delivering papers in the area. Unfortunately, her mother-in-law was dealing with her own flood-related issues and she couldn't help at all. She advised Deborah to immediately dial 911, and Deborah did this at 4:36 a.m.
I have an emergency, a severe emergency. I'm in a flooding. My car veered off the road while I was doing my newspapers, and I'm flooded over here on the end of Kincaid, and it's all the way up to my windows, and I can't get out, and I'm scared to death, ma'am. Can you please help me really bad?
I need you to calm down. I need you to tell me where you are.
I don't know, ma'am. I'm on the end of Kincaid down here by these apartments. There's some apartments on Kincaid. I don't know what they're called.
What color is your vehicle?
Avenue. On the other side of Kincaid, at the very end of Kincaid Street, there's some apartments. And
Do you have a dark blue car is what I'm asking you? What color is your vehicle?
Yeah, dark. It's gray SUV, lady. The water's all the way up to my windows.
Okay, hold on for me. Don't hang up.
As the call goes on, Deborah becomes increasingly upset and she repeatedly states that she can't swim. She became terrified as the water started to creep inside her car, higher and higher, eventually reaching her chest.
Please send somebody fast to get me. I'm scared.
Okay, listen to
I
me.
can't swim. I can't swim. I'm going to drown.
You're not going to drown. Just calm down.
Well, ma'am, it's all the way up to my chest.
Okay,
Please
listen to me.
hurry.
I understand. Hold on for me. Just don't
I'm
hang
scared.
up, okay?
I'm sorry.
I understand. It's fine to be scared. You have a right to be scared.
I'm
Hold on for me.
scared.
The fact that Deborah didn't know her exact location complicated the situation quite a bit. She was unfamiliar with the neighbourhood where her car had been swept away to, and the darkness combined with the high water levels made it extremely difficult to pinpoint her precise location. The emergency dispatcher, a woman named Donna Renault, initially tries to calm Deborah down, assuring her that everything was going to be alright. However, as the water level inside the car continued to rise with no sign of help in sight, Deborah's panic intensifies.
I need somebody to help me. I'm
Are you the
scared.
only one in the vehicle?
Yes, I'm the only one in the vehicle with all my papers floating around me.
Okay, listen to me. I'm going to send somebody out there to you, okay?
What? It's all right. It's getting up to me. I'm scared. I'm gonna die. It's all the way up to my windows. I'm gonna die.
You're not
I
gonna
can't
die.
die. Oh my God.
Meanwhile, the dispatch centre becomes overwhelmed with a massive influx of flood-related calls. Deborah's call was the 15th received that morning, with 19 more callers waiting in the queue. A report published later described the situation as chaotic at best. Recognizing Deborah's panic, the emergency dispatcher prioritized her case. They dispatched a fire engine and a police patrol to assist her. However, help was delayed due to the fact that the police units in the area were quite tied up at that time.
How long is it
Miss
gonna
Jackie,
be, please,
listen
man?
to me. Listen to me. I need you to calm down and hold on.
I'm
Okay?
just scared, man.
I
I'm sorry.
understand that you're scared, but there's nothing I can do sitting in a chair, so you're going to have to hold on, and I'm going to send you somebody, okay?
Oh.
At 4:48 a.m, the fire engine en route to Deborah had to stop and turn around to rescue another person who was trapped in water. When the emergency services finally arrived on Kincaid Avenue where Deborah was trapped, they discovered that there were already several cars in the flooded parking lots. In the darkness, it was virtually impossible to identify which car Deborah was in, even though her indoor light was on. At this point, her car was almost entirely underwater. Her car horn had also died, so she couldn't use that to signal the firefighters. At this point, the water level inside the car was reaching up to her neck. Despite her extreme distress, Deborah was doing her best to describe her location to the dispatcher, hoping that the emergency services would reach her quickly.
What? You go down that street that runs in between those two apartments right there, and I'm on and the street goes to the end, and my car veered off to the left, and I'm behind these last set of apartments on the left-hand side. I'm behind them. I guess it's a circle down there. I don't know. I've never driven down on this part. I don't know, man.
She said she's in...
A minute later, a further disaster struck. Pushed by the strong current, Deborah's car began to move.
Do not hang up because this 911 call is helping me pin your location, so don't hang up on me. Okay, where are you moving to? Tell me where it's going. Okay, tell me where you are. Listen to me, hold on. I'm on the phone with her right now. She is legit freaking out. She said the vehicle is now moving in the water and she doesn't know which way it's going, so stand by.
By this point, it's too late. Deborah is drowning. There is part of the phone call that hasn't been made publicly available, specifically the very last moments at 4:59 a.m. At this moment, the dispatcher realizes that Deborah is drowning and is recorded speaking to the emergency services on the other line saying, "Oh my God, it sounds like she's underwater now." At 5:03 a.m, after receiving help from a witness, a police officer was finally able to locate Deborah's car. It had wedged itself against some trees at the end of the parking lot. The police officer tied a rope around his waist and attempted to reach her, but unfortunately the water was just too deep by that point, and the current was too strong to get anywhere near her submerged SUV. With no other options, they had to wait for a boat, and this took almost an hour. The firefighters eventually managed to retrieve Deborah's body from her car, but despite administering CPR, there was nothing they could do. Deborah Stevens was pronounced dead, her cause of death ruled as accidental drowning. Many who have listened to the entire call have argued that the dispatcher showed a remarkable lack of compassion towards Deborah.
Man, my phone's gonna die, and they're not gonna find me, and it's gonna ruin my brand new phone.
Do you really care about your brand new phone? I mean, you're over there crying for your life. Who cares about your phone?
I need to get down. I need to throw up. I need to throw up right now.
Well, then you're in water. You can throw up. It's not going to matter. If you got throw up on yourself, they'll still help you.
I've never had anything like this happen to me before.
Well, this will teach you next time. Don't drive in the water.
Couldn't see it, ma'am. I'm sorry, or I wouldn't have.
I don't see how you didn't see it. You had to go right over it, so...
No, ma'am, I was in the truck. I was in the parking lot. There was no water where I was at.
Okay.
The back side of these apartments over here, where these people are at, they can all see me. They're all standing out there watching.
Miss Debbie, you're going to have to shut up, okay?
I'm sorry. Can you pray? Will you pray with me? Hello?
I'm here. I can still hear everything you're saying to me.
Will you pray with me, please?
You go ahead and start off the prayer, and I'll listen to you. I sure will.
Dear Lord, please just help me. Get me out of this water safely, dear Father. One of us has to happen to me, Father. Just be with me and protect me and help me, dear Father, please.
The dispatcher's cold and sometimes rude demeanour towards the terrified Deborah would eventually bring this case to worldwide attention. According to authorities, in situations like this, it's important that the emergency dispatcher tries to make sure the person on the other end of the phone isn't panicking, because this could put them into more danger. The dispatcher's cold tone could simply be a way of trying to keep Deborah calm. There was a petition raised to try and imprison Donna Renault, the dispatch caller, but she faced no legal consequences in the end. After a police investigation, it was found that the dispatcher had violated policy by being rude to Deborah at times, but she hadn't violated any laws, and she'd performed her duties appropriately. If the dispatcher had been more polite to Deborah, would the outcome have been any different? Would she have survived? I very much doubt it. I don't think the dispatcher could have done much more in this situation. From the sounds of it, it was pretty hopeless. And could she have made Deborah Stevens' last moments a bit more comfortable? Could she have made her feel slightly less alone? Possibly. Either way, you can't change the past, and now all we have is this final, disturbing recording.
Listen to me, hold on.
Number 3. The final recording of Flight 5055. On the 9th of May 1987, Polish Airlines flight number 5055 took off from the Frederick Chopin Airport in Warsaw. It was heading to New York. Initially, everything proceeded as normal, with the aircraft climbing to 18,000 feet. From there, it planned to climb to a cruising altitude of 31,000 feet. Before they could proceed any further, though, Captain Zygmunt Pawlodzic was informed by flight control that their climb rate was too slow, and he was advised to return to 16,000 feet. The slow climb of Flight 5055 wasn't too unusual. The aircraft, fully loaded with fuel for its transatlantic journey, weighed over 160 tons. Normally, such a slow ascent wouldn't pose a problem, but on that particular day, military aircraft manoeuvres were being conducted at an altitude of 17,000 feet. Since civilian flight control lacked the means to communicate with the military aircraft, they decided to keep Flight 5055 at a lower altitude temporarily to avoid any risk of collision. It took approximately 5 minutes for the aircraft to clear the military exercise area. Once clear, Captain Pavlogic ordered the onboard mechanic to initiate a steeper climbing approach so that they could finally reach a cruising altitude. The mechanic increased all 4 engines to maximum power for about 30 seconds, which allowed the plane to gain altitude quickly. However, at 10:41 AM, there was a sudden explosion at the rear of the airplane which triggered alarms in the cockpit.
Silniki oberwały, 2 silniki obcięło. Nie wiemy co się stało, 2 silniki obcięło. Opuszczamy.
50-55, zrozumiałem.
At this point, the confused crew weren't sure exactly what had happened. They initially thought that they'd been struck by some external object, but they soon realised that the cause had been an explosion in one of their engines. Burning fragments from the destroyed engine pierced the aircraft's hull, causing depressurization. A fire then broke out in the luggage compartment, and moments later, a second engine caught fire. When they had figured out what exactly had happened, the captain updated the flight control on the situation and informed them that they'd switched off both damaged engines as the safety protocols dictated. A few minutes after this, the fire suppression system activated, leading the crew to believe that the fire was under control. Unfortunately, the fire hadn't been fully suppressed, and the flames in the luggage compartment were slowly starting to spread. At this point, 8 kilometers above the ground, the captain decided to abort the flight. Initially, the crew considered landing in Gdansk, which would have been the closest airport, but eventually they changed their mind and decided to return to Warsaw. This is because before they landed, they needed to jettison fuel. The plane was carrying 65 tons of fuel, which meant that the plane was too heavy to land.
Drugi silnik wyłączony, mamy awarię i wchodzimy, kręcimy prawo.
50-55, zrozumiałem, obserwując skręt. Co dalej zamierzacie robić?
Wracamy.
Okej, zamierzacie wracać do Warszawy? Jaka wysokość?
Będziemy zlewać paliwo, wracamy do Warszawy, schodzimy 5400 metrów, schodzimy do 4000.
Zrozumiałem, czy w tym miejscu będziecie zrzucać?
Po wyprowadzeniu ze skrętu będziemy zrzucać paliwo.
Zrozumiałem.
Pożar ugaszony i skończymy zawód.
Unfortunately, it wasn't long after they made this decision that almost all the onboard systems began to malfunction one by one. Despite the situation growing more dire with every passing minute, the crew remained calm and worked with the flight control, providing as many details as possible about their situation. In this recording, the pilot mentions the number of passengers on board.
Lot 50-55. To były które silniki?
Pierwszy i drugi, ale mamy kłopoty ze sterowaniem po steru wysokości.
Rozumiem, na razie utrzymujecie wysokość.
Schodzimy niżej, bo tylko trymerem utrzymujemy wysokość.
Rozumiem. A ilu pasażerów na pokładzie?
71 plus infant.
As the altitude control ceased to function, the systems responsible for fuel jettison completely jammed and failed to operate. At this point, the captain requested permission to land on the Modlin military airfield near Warsaw. They needed to land as quickly as possible because they were steadily losing altitude, and the sheer weight of the fuel, which they couldn't drop, meant that the 2 remaining engines weren't able to keep the heavy aircraft in the air. However, obtaining this permission wasn't straightforward at all. It involved several phone calls on the other end. Although emergency procedures were in place, they still required military approval, a process that consumed precious time that the crew didn't have. Finally, though, they received the green light and they were able to land, but as the captain and his crew gathered in the cockpit to assess their situation, they started to reconsider their options. Although the Modlin military airport was closer, it lacked the adequate emergency services support. At this point, the crew were aware that their landing gear was unresponsive and they would have to land without it. This meant that it would probably be an extremely rough landing, and it was very likely that after landing, some of the passengers would require immediate medical assistance, especially considering that there was a baby on board. At this point, the crew made the difficult decision to change track. They now decided to go back to their original plan. They would fly to Frederick Chopin Airport in Warsaw, where they could get all the necessary emergency backup. Soon after this, there was another explosion on board the aircraft. Flight attendants reported seeing sparks at the rear of the plane, and then the doors were blown off. They also discovered that one of the stewardesses was missing, and it was feared that she had been sucked out of the plane. At this point, bits of the aircraft began to fall off, burning as they fell. Witnesses in a village near Warsaw saw the massive plane struggling to stay airborne. The explosions and the fire had further damaged the aircraft rudder, leaving only the trimmer being partially operational. Normally the trimmer was only used to adjust the aircraft's balance, but now it had become the crew's only means of manoeuvring the plane as it was approaching the airport. The tension and anxiety on board must have been unbearable. At one point, the captain checks his radio communication with air traffic control. This seems to be less of an attempt to verify the radio's functionality and more of an effort to reach out to someone and break the overwhelming radio silence.
Cały czas obserwuję i słyszałem pana na piątkę, nic się na jak na razie nie popsuło. No, pożar jest. Palicie się? Tak.
Another fire appeared to break out on board. It's likely that this was the luggage compartment fire, which had finally grown out of control to a point where the crew had become aware of it. By this point, flames were visible outside the fuselage and could clearly be seen from the ground. Still though, the crew didn't give up. They were determined to reach the airport, which was just a few kilometers away and clearly visible.
Końcowe wchodzenie rozpocznijcie około 11 km do pasa. Zrozumiałem. Drugą kurs 320.
Tragically, all the damage that the airplane had sustained eventually made it impossible to steer, and the craft began to veer off course. The crew completely lost control.
Na prawą stronę osi pasa, dalej w lewo kurs 300. Wiatr jest 290 stopni, 22 km na godzinę, możecie lądować na pasie 3-3.
At 12 minutes past 11, Flight 5055 began to clip the tops of the trees in the Kabaki forest. They then crashed into the ground. They were just 40 seconds shy of reaching the airport. Flight 5055 hit the ground at a speed of 470 kilometers an hour. The shockwave knocked down everything within 50 to 60 meters of the crash, and it shattered windows in nearby houses. Eyewitnesses noted that the pilot seemed to have done everything possible to avoid hitting nearby buildings by crashing directly into the forest. Firefighting units, numerous ambulances, police, military units, and local militia squads arrived on the scene very quickly. Over 60 hectares of forest had been engulfed in flames, with fires that were so intense that rescue attempts were completely impossible. Tragically, everyone on board the aircraft had perished on impact. When the fire was finally extinguished, among the twisted, decimated bodies, they could only identify 121 people, and these people were buried in their hometowns. The rest were buried in a mass grave. A series of investigations revealed several design flaws in the aircraft, particularly in the engines. It was found that in the late 1970s, as a cost-cutting measure, the safe operational life of the engines was doubled. This meant that the paperwork said that the engines were fine, but many of the planes that had those engines were way overdue for service. I keep thinking about the captain's final words. They seem strange to me. He was split seconds away from death, and he just shouted out, "We're dead, goodbye." I don't know why that's strange, just that he felt the need to say goodbye. To me it sounds almost like he wasn't just speaking for himself, but for everybody on board. Anyway, that's the end of the video. 3 disturbing final recordings. I hope you found the video interesting. A huge thanks, as always, to everyone who is supporting the channel. Thank you very much. It's highly appreciated. It really does help keep things going, so thank you very much. If you're in the mood for some more disturbing content, then there should be some videos on screen now, and check them out if you feel like it, or you could just keep an eye out for me in your recommendeds in the future. Until next time, goodbye.